Hazel Bryan Massery was a student at Little Rock Central High School during the 1950s. She was depicted in an iconic photograph that showed her shouting at Elizabeth Eckford, one of the Little Rock Nine, during the integration crisis. In her later life, she would attempt to make amends for this and briefly became friends with Eckford. Little Rock Nine and the education integration. The integration between African Americans and white people in public facilities was not an easy move. In 1954, the Supreme Court unregistered trademark's decision of the Brown v. Board of Education was a significant move towards integration and the equality of African Americans in the United States. In 1955, the Supreme Court addressed an additional Brown decision of integrating national schools. However, the majority of the white citizens in southern states did not unregistered trademark T accept the Brown's decision. The vast majority of Southern congressional representatives and senators signed the Southern Manifesto unregistered trademark, which urged white Southerners to resist forced integration by any lawful means. Unregistered trademark of white students in the school, and they were worried about their children going to the same school with African American kids. The resistance was also violent too, with angry mobs on the street. The opposing power was mostly supported by the Armed State Guard. On September 4, 1957, 9 African American children, including Elizabeth Eckford, entered the Little Rock Central High, Arkansas. However, Eckford was late on the day of enrollment and met the mob alone. The famous photo of Hazel Bryan shouting at Elizabeth Eckford was taken that day by 26-year-old journalist Will Counts. Life. On September 4, 1957, 9 African American students entered Little Rock Central High School as the school's first black students, including Elizabeth Eckford. On her way to the school, a group of white teenage girls followed Eckford in protest, chanting OE 2, 4, 6, 8. We don't need unregistered trademark T want to integrate. One of these girls is Hazel Bryan. Benjamin Fine of the New York Times later described her as OEsh was screaming, just hysterical, just like one of these Elvis Presley hysterical deals, where these kids are fainting with hysteria. Bryan is also credited as shouting OE go home, nigger. Go back to Africa. After the photo became public, Hazel started to receive hate mail, all from the North. In the article OE Elizabeth Eckford and Hazel Bryan, the story behind the photograph that shamed America author David Margolick writes OE Hazel unregistered trademark's parents, though, found her sudden notoriety sufficiently alarming to pull her out of the school. The life after the OE Little Rock Nini event, Bryan left her new school when she was 17, got married to Antoine Massery and began a family. After that, her mind toward Martin Luther King and the concept of desegregating changed. OE Hazel Bryan Massery was curious, and reflective. One day, she realized, her children would learn that the snarling girl in their history books was their mother. She realized she had an account to settle in 1963, having changed her mind on integration and feeling guilt for her treatment of Eckford. Bryan contacted Eckford to apologize. They went their separate ways after this first meeting, and Eckford did not name the girl in the picture when asked about it by reporters. The conversation was on the telephone and lasted for 1 minute. I just told her who I was. I was the girl in that picture that was yelling at her, that I was sorry, that it was a terrible thing to do and that I didn't want my children to grow up to be like that, and I was crying, Bryan says. During the time after the Little Rock, OE Hazel had become increasingly political, branching out into peace activism and social work. David Margolick discovers OE she taught mothering skills to unmarried black women, and took underprivileged black teenagers on field trips. She frequented the Black History section at the local Barnes & Noble, buying books by Cornel West and Shelby Steele and the companion volume to Eyes on the Prize. Bryan hoped her reputation could be gained back, but this did not happen until the 40th anniversary of Central unregistered trademark's desegregation in 1997. Will Count, the journalist who took the famous picture, arranged for Elizabeth and Hazel to meet again. The reunion provided an opportunity for acts of reconciliation, as noted in this editorial from the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette on the first day of 1998. One of the fascinating stories to come out of the reunion was the apology that Hazel Bryan Massery made to Elizabeth Eckford for a terrible moment caught forever by the camera. That 40-year-old picture of Hater sailing grace which had gnawed at Miss Massery for decades can now be wiped clean, and replaced by a snapshot of two friends. The apology came from the real Hazel Bryan Massery, the decent woman who had been hidden all those years by a fleeting image. And the graceful acceptance of that apology was but another act of dignity in the life of Elizabeth Eckford. Friendship with Elizabeth Eckford. Feeling awkward when they first met, Elizabeth and Bryan surprisingly became great friends afterwards. They went to flower shows together, bought fabrics together, took mineral baths and massages together, appeared in documentaries and before-school groups together. Since Elizabeth had never learned to drive, Hazel joked that she had become Elizabeth's chauffeur. Whenever something cost money, Hazel treated. It was awkward for Elizabeth, who had a hard time explaining to people just how poor she was. In 1998, Massery told The Guardian, "I am not sure at that age what I thought, but probably I overheard that my father was opposed to integration, but I don't think I was old enough to have any convictions of my own yet." Later in life she changed her mind. She had thought of Martin Luther King as a troublemaker, but realized deep down in your soul, he was right. Soon after, the friendship began to fray. In 1999, David Margolick traveled to Little Rock and arranged to meet Elizabeth and Hazel. According to Hazel Bryan, she said, I think she's still at times we have a little well, the honeymoon is over and now we unregistered trademark getting to take out the garbage as Eckford began to believe Bryan wanted me to be cured and be over it and for this not to go on. She wanted me to be less uncomfortable so that she wouldn't feel responsible anymore. The other 8 of the Little Rock 9 didn't unregistered trademark want this friendship to last any longer. The friendship quietly dissolved in 1999, when Elizabeth Eckford wrote true reconciliation can occur only when we honestly acknowledge our painful, but shared, past on the brick of Central High. This message confused Bryan, and she stated I just had hoped that I could show this picture and say, this happened, and that happened, and now unregistered trademark and there is no now unregistered trademark, she said. And that makes me sad. It makes me sad for them, it makes me sad for the future students at our school, and for the history books, because unregistered trademark like a happy ending. And we'd only unregistered trademark have that Bryan and Eckford have only spoken twice since, both times in 2001, though the Masserys sent a condolence card after Eckford's son was killed. When David Margolick met Elizabeth Eckford again in 2011, Elizabeth said I wish I could tell her how much she helped me, she says. I don't think I ever told her that. The pressure from different people grew too much on Hazel Bryan. David Margolick wrote in the article the many lives of Hazel Bryan she cut off ties with Elizabeth for her. September 11, 2011, marked another anniversary. 10 years had passed since their unregistered trademark last spoke in and stopped making public appearances with her References. External links, alternate photograph from a different angle, taken by all counts. Vanity Fair story on the desegregation of Little Rock Central High School.